Indoor Matters with Damien and Sarah.
Welcome back to Indoor Matters, the podcast where we tackle what really matters for your indoor health. I'm Damien.
And I'm Sarah.
Big thanks to our sponsors, SaniService,
Dubai's only indoor environmental health quality management company, for making this information possible. You know, we talk a lot about all kinds of things when it comes to indoor health on this show, but one thing that often slips under the radar is the connection between humidity.
Oh, absolutely.
And indoor air quality.
Yeah, and it's not just about feeling comfortable. Humidity actually plays a huge role in how certain pollutants, especially chemicals called TVOCs, or total volatile organic compounds, behave indoors.
Okay, so for those of us who might not be familiar with TVOCs, can you break down what exactly they are and why they should matter to us, especially living here in Dubai?
Yeah, so think about all the everyday stuff in your home. You've got paints, furniture, cleaning products, even your carpets and electronics. Lots of these materials release these tiny, invisible organic chemicals into the air.
And that's what we call TVOCs. It's like they're constantly off-gassing, even if we can't see or smell it.
That's kind of unsettling when you think about it. And here in Dubai, we spend so much time indoors, especially during those scorching summer months.
Oh, absolutely.
It seems like this could be a real problem.
It definitely is. And you know what makes it even more important in Dubai?
What's that?
Our AC. Air conditioning is essential for comfort.
Right.
But it creates this weird paradox when it comes to TVOCs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Well, on one hand, AC can control humidity, which we know is important.
Right.
But on the other hand, it can dry out the air, and that dryness can actually make some materials release TVOCs even more. So it's all about finding that right balance.
So it's not just about temperature, it's about humidity too.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Before we get into that balancing act,
Yeah.
Can you give us some specific examples of TVOCs? What kind of chemicals are we talking about here?
So some common ones you've probably heard of are formaldehyde. You can find that in pressed wood products, some adhesives, benzene, it's in tobacco smoke,
Right.
and some paints. And then there's toluene, often found in paints, varnishes, even nail polish remover.
Wow.
These are just a few, but there are so many more.
It's starting to feel like these TVOCs are everywhere.
They really are pretty common. And the thing is, different TVOCs have different effects on your health. And how severe they are often depends on the concentration and how long you're exposed.
So let's talk about those health risks then. What are some of the potential problems that come with TVOC exposure? We need to understand what's at stake here.
Yeah, so in the short term, being exposed to high levels of TVOCs can cause a bunch of symptoms. You might get headaches, eye irritation, throat irritation, dizziness, even allergic skin reactions. But the more concerning effects are the long-term ones. Some studies suggest that if you're exposed to certain TVOCs for a long time, it might increase your risk of respiratory problems, damage to organs like your liver and kidneys,
Oh, wow.
and even some types of cancer.
That's pretty serious. It sounds like something we need to be taking seriously,
Definitely.
especially with the unique challenges we face here in Dubai. You mentioned earlier that both high and low humidity can actually make TVOC problems worse.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a bit more? How does humidity play into all of this?
Well, it all comes down to how humidity affects both the materials in our homes and those little chemical particles floating in the air. Think about high humidity, which we definitely get a lot of here in Dubai.
Oh, yes.
It can create a perfect environment for mold and mildew to grow. And guess what?
They release TVOCs.
You got it. Mold and mildew release TVOCs as they grow.
So that's one strike against high humidity.
Exactly. But here's the catch.
Okay.
Low humidity can be just as bad. When the air is too dry, which can happen a lot when we're blasting the AC,
Right.
it can make certain materials dry out and crack. And you know what happens then?
Those cracks release the TVOCs.
Bingo. Those cracks can release trapped TVOCs into the air.
So we're basically stuck in this humidity dilemma.
Sort of, yeah.
High humidity is bad, low humidity is bad. It seems like finding that sweet spot is crucial for keeping those TVOC levels in check, especially here in Dubai, where the climate can be so extreme. But before we jump into solutions,
Yeah.
I think it's important to be clear on what we mean by humidity, because there are actually two types we need to think about.
Right.
Absolute humidity and relative humidity.
You're absolutely right. And knowing the difference is key here.
Okay, so walk us through that. What is relative humidity and why is it so important in this context?
So relative humidity basically tells you how much moisture is in the air compared to how much moisture the air could hold at a specific temperature.
Okay.
And here's the important part. As the temperature increases, the air can actually hold more moisture.
Interesting.
So even if the actual amount of moisture in the air stays the same, as the temperature goes up, the relative humidity goes down.
So it's a bit of a moving target then. That makes things a little more complicated, doesn't it?
It definitely does. It means that simply cooling the air with AC without thinking about the effect on relative humidity could actually make the TVOC problem worse.
So it's not just about cranking down the thermostat.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot for humidity as well.
Exactly.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, especially here in Dubai with our extreme temperatures.
You could say that. And it's why understanding this link between temperature, relative humidity, and TVOCs is so important for having a truly healthy indoor environment here in Dubai.
All right, you've definitely convinced us that humidity and TVOCs are issues we need to pay attention to. But before we get too overwhelmed,
Yeah.
let's switch gears and talk about solutions.
Okay.
What are some practical things we can do to manage humidity and lower our exposure to these potentially harmful chemicals, especially in a place like Dubai where we're constantly battling the elements?
There are definitely things we can do. And the good news is a lot of them are pretty simple and can make a big difference.
Well, I'm all ears. Let's hear those solutions.
One of the most basic things you can do is ventilation.
Okay, ventilation makes sense.
Right.
Fresh air can help dilute those pollutants inside.
Yeah.
But like we talked about, opening windows isn't always an option here in Dubai,
Right.
especially in the middle of summer. What are some other ways to get better ventilation without turning our homes into saunas?
You're right. It's not just about opening windows whenever. It's about having a system for consistent air exchange. One way is to be strategic about opening windows when it's cooler, like early mornings or late evenings when the temperature drops a bit. You can also use those exhaust fans, especially in kitchens and bathrooms, to get rid of stale air and pull in fresher air from other areas.
And I bet ceiling fans can help too, right?
Absolutely.
Just to keep the air moving and prevent things from getting stagnant?
Exactly. Circulation is so important. Fans help distribute the fresh air throughout your home so you don't get those pockets of high TVOC concentration. It's a simple thing to do, but it really works.
So ventilation and circulation are good starting points. But what about those of us who want to go a step further? Are there any more, advanced options for managing humidity and TVOCs?
For sure. If you want a more comprehensive solutions, you can look into mechanical ventilation systems. They go beyond just basic ventilation and can actually control how much fresh air comes in and the humidity levels too.
What are some examples of these systems?
Well, there are those exhaust fans we already mentioned.
Right.
But then you have more sophisticated systems like air exchange units or energy recovery ventilators, ERVs.
ERVs. Those sound pretty fancy. What exactly are they?
They're pretty cool. They're like supercharged ventilation systems. They bring in the fresh air from outside and get rid of the stale air inside. But the really clever part is they use a heat exchanger
Oh, wow.
to transfer energy from the outgoing air to precondition the incoming air.
So it's like recycling the energy to make the whole system more efficient. That sounds very Dubai. Always looking for ways to conserve energy.
Exactly. It's a win-win for both air quality and energy efficiency. And in a climate like Dubai, where we're always running our ACs, that efficiency can make a huge difference.
Speaking of AC, what about those air purifiers they advertise everywhere? Don't they help with TVOCs too?
Air purifiers can be helpful for removing things like dust, pollen, and pet dander from the air, but they aren't always that effective when it comes to TVOCs. Some purifiers have activated carbon filters that can trap some VOCs, but they might not get all of them, and you have to replace the filters pretty often.
Okay, so purifiers might not be the best solution for TVOCs on their own.
Yeah.
What about air sanitizers? Those seem to be getting pretty popular. Do they have any advantages over air purifiers?
Yes. Air sanitizers work differently than air purifiers. Purifiers mainly trap particles.
Right.
But sanitizers are made to neutralize those bad pathogens and break down VOCs at a molecular level.
So they actually destroy those chemicals?
Yes.
How do they do that?
They use something called photocatalytic oxidation. It's a little technical, but basically the sanitizer has a special light source, usually UV light, to activate a catalyst, which is typically a metal oxide like titanium dioxide. The catalyst then triggers a chemical reaction that breaks down VOCs into less harmful things like carbon dioxide and water.
So it's like a tiny chemistry lab working to clean the air. That's pretty impressive.
Okay.
Are there any air sanitizers in particular that you'd recommend for someone living in Dubai?
One that I recommend a lot is the TPA X8 Pro.
Okay.
It's specifically designed for those air quality challenges we have here, like high levels of dust, VOCs, even mold spores. It's a pretty complete air purification system that can really make a difference in your home.
That sounds like it could be a good investment, especially with the health risks that come with long-term exposure to TVOCs. Now, back to humidity.
Yeah.
You mentioned finding that sweet spot is really important. So what's the magic number? What's the ideal relative humidity for a home in Dubai?
Most experts say you should aim for between 40 and 60% relative humidity. That range is best for both comfort and health because it helps keep mold and mildew from growing too much and also reduces how much those TVOCs off-gas from building materials and furniture.
Got it. 40 to 60%.
Yeah.
So how do we actually maintain that? Do we need to be constantly checking the humidity with some fancy gadget?
You don't have to go crazy. Simple things like having a hygrometer to keep track of your humidity levels can help.
Right.
And when it's really humid, a dehumidifier can be a lifesaver.
Dehumidifiers, those are so important here in Dubai.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the humidity can get really intense. They help prevent that mold growth, which, like we've talked about, is a big source of TVOCs.
Exactly. And don't forget, like we said before, temperature changes can affect humidity too. So keeping a consistent indoor temperature, even when it's super hot outside, is an important part of managing humidity.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's all about creating a balanced indoor environment. We need the right ventilation and circulation, consistent temperatures, and that 40 to 60% humidity sweet spot.
You got it. It's like a carefully planned system, but it's so worth it. And don't forget, a healthy indoor environment isn't just about being physically healthy.
Right.
It can actually help you feel better mentally, sleep better, and even be more productive.
I totally agree. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more important thing I want to touch on. We've been talking about the risks of TVOCs, but are there certain groups of people who are more vulnerable to these chemicals than others?
Yes, definitely. Children, older adults, and people with breathing problems like asthma or allergies are generally more sensitive to the effects of TVOCs. Their bodies are often more sensitive, and it might be harder for them to get rid of those chemicals.
That makes sense. And here in Dubai, we have so many families with young children and older residents.
Yeah.
So it's something we need to be extra careful about.
Absolutely. If you have young children, older adults, or anyone with respiratory issues living with you, taking extra steps to keep their exposure to TVOCs low is really important.
So what can we do specifically to make things healthier for these more vulnerable groups?
Well, on top of everything we've already talked about, like ventilation, humidity control, choosing low VOC products, there are a few other things to keep in mind, especially in children's rooms.
Okay.
It's super important to choose toys and furniture made from natural materials. Avoid using harsh cleaning products and air out the room often.
It's all about making a safe space for the people who are most sensitive. What about older folks or those with breathing conditions? Any special tips for them?
For those groups, it's super important to keep them away from anything that could irritate them, like dust mites, pet dander, and strong smells. Cleaning regularly, using HEPA filters in your vacuum cleaner and air purifier, and keeping pets out of bedrooms can all help reduce exposure.
So it's about being extra careful and taking those extra steps to protect the people who need it most.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've learned about the dangers of TVOCs, the importance of humidity control. Absolutely.
And the different things we can do to create healthier homes, especially here in Dubai.
It's been a really great discussion. I think the main thing to remember is that we have a lot more control over our indoor environment than we think. By understanding the risks and taking steps to make things better, we can really make a difference in our health and how we feel overall.
Well said. And a big thanks again to Sanitizers, Dubai's top indoor environmental health quality management company.
They're great.
For supporting this episode of the Indoor Matters podcast. They're an awesome resource for anyone who wants to learn more about making healthier indoor spaces here in the UAE.
They really are. They offer all kinds of services like air and water, quality testing, mold removal, pest control.
It's like a one-stop shop for all things indoor environmental health.
Absolutely.
So listeners, if you're concerned about the air you breathe, the water you use, or anything else in your home environment, definitely check out Sanitizers. You can find their contact information on their website or give them a call. And don't forget to mention that you heard about them on the Indoor Matters podcast to get a special discount on their services.
That's a great deal. Now, before we go, I want to leave you with a question to think about. We've talked about balancing temperature control with keeping those humidity levels just right to minimize TVOCs.
Right.
But because we use AC so much in Dubai, how can we do that? What new solutions or changes in how we live can we use to make sure we have both comfort and healthy indoor air?
That's a great question for our listeners to think about. It's a good reminder that this conversation about indoor environmental health is ongoing, and we all have a part to play in creating healthier spaces for ourselves and our communities.
For sure. It's a team effort, and the more we understand about our indoor environment, the better we can be at making spaces that truly help us be healthy and feel good.
Well said. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the Indoor Matters podcast. We'll be back next time with another insightful discussion on something that matters for your indoor health. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay well. It is a fascinating challenge, trying to create this balance between comfort and health, especially in a place like Dubai.
It really is almost like we're trying to build our own little climates inside our homes.
Right.
These perfectly controlled bubbles of temperature and humidity and clean air, all while we're dealing with that intense heat and humidity right outside.
Exactly. And we can't forget about those unique aspects of living in Dubai when it comes to architecture. I mean, we have so many high-rises here that can sometimes make natural ventilation tricky.
Oh, for sure.
We can't just open a window on the 50th floor and expect a nice breeze to flow through.
No, definitely not.
And, it's not even just about the big things like temperature and humidity. There are so many other things that contribute to a healthy home.
Right.
Things we might not even think about, like noise pollution from all the traffic and construction.
Oh, yeah.
The quality of light, and even what our furniture and decorations are made of. It's all connected.
You're absolutely right. It's like a whole ecosystem. And as we start to understand those connections better, it really shows just how much our indoor environment can affect our overall well-being.
I think that's such an important point. We spend so much time focusing on things like diet and exercise for our health, but we often forget about the impact of the spaces where we actually spend most of our time.
Exactly. We're indoors the majority of our lives.
Right.
So it just makes sense to make those spaces support our health, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too.
It's funny because I was just thinking about how much better I feel when I'm in a space that's clean and well ventilated with plenty of natural light. It instantly puts me in a good mood.
Oh, absolutely. And on the flip side, I know I can get really sluggish and irritable if I'm stuck in a stuffy, dark room for too long. Our surroundings really do have a huge impact on us.
Yeah, our mood, how much energy we have, our sleep, our focus.
Yeah, it's all connected.
It's a reminder that our homes are more than just places to eat and sleep. They're part of who we are, and they can either help us thrive or hold us back.
I love that. It's all about creating a sanctuary, a place that nourishes us in every way.
Well, Sarah, I think you've done a fantastic job of explaining how to create healthy indoor environments, especially here in Dubai where we have those unique challenges.
Thank you.
You've given us a lot to consider, and I hope our listeners feel empowered to take what they've learned and make some positive changes in their own homes.
It was my pleasure. I'm really passionate about this topic.
We appreciate your expertise so much, Sarah. You've been incredibly informative. And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Indoor Matters podcast. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. If you want to learn more about creating a healthier indoor environment, we encourage you to reach out to our sponsor, SaniTizers.
They're great.
They're the experts in indoor environmental health here in Dubai, and they can give you personalized advice and solutions to help you meet your goals.
They're a fantastic resource.
Absolutely. And don't forget to mention that you heard about them on the Indoor Matters podcast to get a special discount on their services.
That's a great tip.
So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay healthy. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Indoor Matters podcast, where we'll dive into a topic that matters to your indoor health.